Welcome to Post Game Gossip, where nothing goes unsaid and nothing is off limits. This is your backstage pass to the unfiltered, behind-the-scenes conversations. From wild dating disasters to jaw-dropping relationship revelations, we're diving deep into the raw truth about love, lust, and everything in between. It's like your favorite locker room chat, but for your love life. The drama, the laughs, the lessons, it's all happening right here. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Welcome to Post Game Gossip. Janine, welcome to Post Game Gossip. How you feeling?
I am so good. How are you doing?
Great. I'm excited that you're here. Why don't you give the viewers a little bit of a background on who you are?
Who is Janine Allen? Well, there you go. I gave my whole name away. So
The whole government.
yes. No. I'm Janine. Do I have to say my age? Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
She's in her 40s. I'll say that. Yeah, she's an oldie. I'm based in London. I'm originally from Manchester, for those of you who know the UK. I moved to London when I was 4, so I class myself as a fully fledged Londoner. Zero accent. She's not a Mancunian. Well, she is at heart, but she doesn't sound like one. And then I live in the big bad city of London, and I love all aspects of London. It's in my DNA, I would say. Now, multicultural it is. I love that I can just go and do whatever I want, whenever I want. Yeah, there's always something fun to do. And what else is there? There isn't much unless you ask me. I'm now Jade's friend. 4 months in. We've met via work. Do we talk about work here?
Yeah, all good.
We know each other. We're family of the Honorverse, if that's what we want to say. That might sound a little bit cringe, but that is the actual truth. I don't know.
And Mallorca, we started talking about hopping on a podcast together.
Yeah. Mallorca was our place to be. I'd say what happens in Mallorca stays in Mallorca, but I didn't really do anything that would mean that sentence. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, we'll dive into all that for sure. But thank you so much for being here, and I'm super excited. But our topic of today is actually changes in relationships. So basically, the main question of today is it fair to expect someone to stay the same version of themselves that we first loved and connected with? So let's get into that. I mean, if you think back to the early stages of any relationship, a best friend in college, your first love, a mentor, family member, there's a version of them etched in your mind, right? So like the quirks that you love, the way that they made you feel, the person that they were back then. But when time passes, people change, right? So maybe it's at some point that they have boundaries all of a sudden, or they have just grown and you've stayed behind, or the other way around. So let's unpack that a little bit. I mean, it's like we build emotional connections with people and emotional contracts without even realizing it. And what makes this tricky is when someone's growth starts to misalign with your own, maybe that's when they become more career focused or less available, like we talked about before. I mean, when you're expecting someone to stay the same forever, it's like asking a tree not to grow because you like the shape of it the summer before. It's not really fair. So do you recall a major change of your past or current relationship, and why did it change? Where did it start changing? Walk me through that.
Oh gosh, I have so many, right? But if I were to reflect on, I'll talk about a friendship that have changed. Like I have friends who I've been friends with since I was like 7 years old, and some that I've become friends with like later on in life. But I also believe like we move through stages, right? And this particular relationship was exactly that. Like I think we were at different stages in our life. We experienced different things. We were young, as people always say. I think recently I've had to kind of just pause and reflect on that relationship and how it's changed, because sometimes when you stop being friends with someone, it's like it's a loss, right? Not only is it a loss of that person, but it's also a loss of self, because I think like you can reflect on who you were when you were in that
Yeah.
friendship with that person. And so I also think that that is part of the loss. And I kind of only landed on that a couple of years ago. So I feel like if I'd known that, like that whole loss of self thing, that really would have helped with my process. Because then you have to ask yourself the question, actually, like the person that I am today doesn't align with the person that I was then. So would that relationship serve you right now?
Mm.
And a lot of the time, the answer is no.
Right.
And there's no right or wrong to it. Like, we also just have to accept that that part of us has grown and we've left it and we're ready to move on. But if I look at that friendship, would I step into it with the same excitement like now? And the answer is
Yeah.
absolutely no, because I'm not that person anymore. So I was upset because this person I was very close to, we'd kind of been like, when we get older, you're gonna get married and I'm gonna be there, and like you're gonna have your first child and I'm gonna be there. And actually, I wasn't there for any of it. I was almost like
Mm.
an outsider. So I wasn't like they had two ceremonies. I was like invited to like the friends ceremony. Um, this person I only really they didn't even tell me they were pregnant when they were pregnant. And I got really upset about it. But then when I reflected on like that half of it is like, I lost myself in that in growing. And actually our relationships, our wants, our likes, our dislikes, they're not the same as they were back then.
Yeah.
And so like that was a bit of a lesson learned for me. And I was allowed to let it go with love. Like, you know, I still class them as a friend. We're just not friends in the same way that we were. And actually that's okay. Um,
Were you guys in the same circle of friends or in this like lived in the same area or
yeah, we lived in the same area. We worked together.
ah,
Like we went on holiday together.
I mean that makes it so much harder when you have to re-see them at work after you've been through that transition.
Well, I mean, now we don't no longer work together, so we don't
Yeah.
see each other in that capacity. But we saw each other all the time. We were at work together, we worked together, we spent time outside of work together, and I think when you have that connection with someone, you're like, okay, you are going to be with me for life. Like
Yeah.
that's it. And that's actually what we thought. We were like, we will never we experience like loss together, like bereavement together, so many things like stages in life that you'd experience, big, small milestones, whatever it been, we kind of experienced it all together. So
Yeah.
I think at a young age you just assumed that that's it, like they're my person for the rest of my life. But it's actually, I think what I've realized is actually okay, like we're different people. I wish them love, um all of that, but we're just not there. We're not going to be there again.
Yeah.
We're two completely different people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in knowing that it's okay to let go. And that's something that I needed to learn the hard way as well, because I love to look at things and see the good in people. And even if they did something wrong, you're like, okay, it's time to let go. I'm
Mm,
always the one that trickles back in. It's like, oh, make excuses for them and it's okay. And they didn't mean it that way. And then I try to fix everything
mm,
when what you talked about in learning the power of letting go and knowing it's okay is so powerful.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
But what do you think was the biggest challenge during that transition for you? Like you even talked about the self part of everything that you had to learn. How did you go through those stages?
I think there's a lot to be said on reflecting. And I think in my like late 20s, early 30s, um, I probably didn't do that. And I think the reflection piece is there's one thing knowing that actually something isn't quite right or wasn't quite right. But there's another thing when you can like step into that, like, I'm going to be uncomfortable in this space. So I'm going to take a
Yeah.
moment to reflect, and I'm going to reflect and feel uncomfortable. Whereas just knowing that it's wrong and being like, okay, I know it's wrong, just moving on. But I think they're two different things. And I think some people are like, yeah, I reflected, but no, you just realized that it wasn't. There's difference between realizing and actually sitting in that uncomfort. So, and that's also something that I kind of learned later on in life. And like, I had to sit in it, like that reflection piece, I had to really sit in. And up until very recently, I've had to sitting it. And really think about it, because sometimes you have to, like, there's some hard truths, right? Like, it's not all the other person. Like, maybe they hurt you and it's uncomfortable to sit there and realize that. But then there's the other bit where you're like, actually, how did I show up in that moment? Like, and that's a harder pill to swallow. It's really easy to be like, they did that wrong and I don't like what they did, versus, okay, I'm really going to sit here and think about what I did wrong. And so that transition piece, even though, and we're talking about like 5-6 years ago versus now, like, I've still been working through that up until recently. And I think when I spoke to a lot of people about it, I was like, yeah, but I'm okay, moving on. But the fact is that you're not, because if I'm still reflecting on that so far along, actually it had probably more of an effect on me than I initially thought. And that's also something, like, sometimes you're like, oh, do you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm going to move on. It, like, I'm a bigger person. But actually, part of that process is being like, yeah, I know, I'm still here. I'm still sitting with this. I'm still trying to understand it. And it's that this person was a big part of my life. I love them dearly. But also, I didn't necessarily show up in the best way. There were things that I could have done. There are conversations that I could have had. You know, there are boundaries that potentially I could have set. There are times that I could have said, actually, this didn't sit quite right with me. And it was easier to just be like, I don't want any part of this. And actually, I know that now. And I understand that. And I also think with relationships, we also have to realize that, we can really sit here and be like, I know myself, like, I know who I am, a personality. But the truth of the matter, this is also my perspective, is that I actually don't know. I don't know what a relationship is going to look like to that capacity now that I'm in my 40s, because I haven't experienced it. So actually, I don't really know that side of myself. I know myself based on things that have happened in the past, but actually, I don't know how I'm going to show up every day in every situation. There are obviously steps that we can take, but sometimes we surprise ourselves and actually we say and do things that maybe we would have spoken to and said, actually, I would never have done that. And it's also being okay with that. The transition is something that I've continued to work through, and I'm okay with saying that, because I cared and I understand that I cared. If I didn't care, I would have just been like, whatever. But also for me, I'm just trying to reflect on, like, how do I become a better person on the other side of it and have a deeper understanding. So yeah, I feel like I'm getting there now, and that's okay. And I have a deeper understanding of how our relationship changed and also how I showed up. And essentially what I would want to do differently if I were presented with the same if the same situation were to present itself again. Yeah.
Do you feel like that's the same type of transition you would go through if it was a relationship, like a partner relationship?
That's so interesting, because partner relationship versus friend relationship is slightly different always. So yeah, and I've been through the breakup, like breakups, and it makes me sound really old, but breakups in your 30s, early 30s, late 20s hit completely different when you're in your 40s. And the only reason I say that is because you know yourself better. So I feel like you put up more boundaries when you're older, versus when you're younger.
But does that make it easier or harder though? Because if you've set more boundaries and then you found a person that align with those boundaries and then you have to let go, I feel like that's even harder.
There isn't a right or wrong. Sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier. It really doesn't, like, it depends on how much you care, right? Like how much you care about yourself and how much you care about that person. I wouldn't say it goes either which way, in any way, shape or form. And I also, it does hit differently. It doesn't have to. I think when it comes to emotions, there's no like rule book of like, yeah, I just think it hits in a completely different way. There's always this part that when you're in, I feel like when there's a friendship, it's easier for you to show up and be your authentic self versus when you're in a relationship. Because sometimes, like in a lot of friendships, you're not trying to make that person your friend, they just become your friend. But when you're in a relationship, you want that person to like you. And
Yeah.
everyone can be like, I'm just going to be myself. I'm just going to show up and be myself in this relationship. And this person's going to, and you talk about, this is going back to the old dating days and doing the awful like dating apps and stuff, and you're like, transparency is key, it's so important to me, I want you to show up and be your true self, and all of that. Sorry to anyone that's living that life, but I feel like it's a big part of it. But I feel like the reality is you're trying to scope the person out, so you
Right.
actually are not going to show up and be your authentic self. I feel like that's important to realize. But it's how far do you go in continuing, like, showing up as this person who maybe you were on the first date? Like, how far are you going to go with that?
Right.
Because essentially you need to show that person who you are.
Yeah. Or you're hiding yourself for the rest of your life.
Or you're hiding yourself for the rest of life. So it's like how long and how comfortable, and there is I love these conversations because I think what you realize is the more you have the conversation, like the more there are so many different nuances and the more complicated it could be. But the reality is that we actually make it complicated, so there, and then you can get onto like, where are the red flags, and like we see them, we decide not to see them. Yeah,
It's a you problem. It's not a them problem.
yeah, exactly. And I feel like if people just kind of did that, and it's okay to step away, and if people were just happy to step away, but I also realize it's also not that easy. Like, stepping away from a situation and you're just like, I want to find my person. There's no one out there, and this person's my person. Um,
I
yeah.
mean, sometimes you don't see those red flags until like 2, 3, 4 years in. And then you feel like you're so deep, and then you sit there with yourself. You're like, shit, am I really gonna let all of these 4 years go because of this one situation? But then you realize that situation carries on,
Yeah.
but you also don't want to let go because you put so much effort in, right? So there's a huge internal battle that
That
happens.
literally it is, yeah, it's hard. Like I say to my friends they're dating, I'm just like, I'm so happy I'm not in this place, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I say that all the time. And not only we are like learning about ourselves, but we also then have to learn about another person. And yeah, it's difficult. But yeah, to your question, I it does hit differently, but I don't think there's a wrong or right answer. I think it is very much down to self. Like, however you want to show up in that relationship and deal with certain situations, it all does rest on you. And even if you're like, well, that person did this and that person did that, well, you allowed them to do it or not do it, or so unfortunately, like, I will always land on, it's us. There are some people that are just shit. Yeah, we know who they are. But also, if we know that they're shit, it's our decision to stay around in the shit, right? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to be a fly for the rest of your life? Like, just.
That's actually such a call out that it's like, if you don't agree with something, you can just walk away. No one's holding you hostage unless they are, but they shouldn't be.
No, they shouldn't. I hope they're not.
Next Netflix series is someone being
Yeah.
held hostage. No, but that's so true. And I think that really cuts deep when you realize that you're not being held captive in this. It's your decision and you're doing it to yourself. But do you feel like the people that stay in those relationships when they know that maybe they shouldn't, that they have some sort of self-worth issue, or like why is that?
Yeah, I definitely, there is something to be said with the self-worth for sure. Um, because I think we're very good at pointing out if it's right or it's wrong. Um, and it's black and white. Like, it's right, it's wrong. You stay or you
Yeah.
leave. Like, that's essentially it. Obviously, we know it's not that simple. But I think there's also something to be said, is like, at what stage are you going into a relationship? Like, I don't like to say it, but there's this whole thing like, are you your whole self or are you going in at 40%? So we'll use that analogy. Like, are you your whole self? I don't know if anyone is ever truly their whole self, but as comfortable in self as possible. or are you just going in at 40%? Like, I've had so many different conversations with girlfriends where it's like, oh, I'm not feeling great, but if I were to be in a relationship, I'd feel so much better. And actually, that's a really dangerous
Yeah.
place to be in. Like, to enter a relationship at that point is really dangerous. So there is something to be said. Like, if you're out there and you're dating, because also if you're at 40%, even if you're at 60%, or even, yeah, it's very unlikely that you're gonna be showing up as your authentic self, or as close to that, or a place where you feel comfortable in yourself. So actually, you're probably going to be wearing a mask for a lot of the time. And then when you feel like, I'm comfortable, then you're going to let that guard down. And then this person's going to be like, who the hell is this? I know this
Didn't
person.
sign up for this.
Sign up for this. Like, I don't want to be any part of this. And you're like, well, this is who I am. Like, this is who you fell in love with. And you're like, I didn't fall in love with you. So, like, and then that's a whole, that's a whole story. So then there's like that thing where you're like, actually, who was I when I started this dating journey with this person? So I also think there's something to be said in that. And I speak from experience. Like, I've been in a relationship for nearly 5 years now. And if I look back, we met in COVID. If I look back to when we met during COVID, we had a lot of work to do on ourselves before we got into our relationship. And we went to therapy. We've been to multiple therapists, but it's taken a long time and a lot of work for us to get here, because I don't think either of us, if we use the example of being your whole self, 100%, whatever you want to call it, neither of us showed up at that time like comfortable in who we were, and we were dealing with, a lot of issues, whether they were from the past. So actually, it was a dangerous place for us, and it just made things harder. I can say after years of work now, yes, we are in a better place, but it's been hard to get there. And that's it, right? I don't think any relationship's easy, but there's a certain amount you need to know about yourself stepping into it that will make the journey a lot easier.
Do you feel like, did you guys go to therapy together or separate?
Together and separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would probably think, oh, if you already have to go to therapy early stages of your relationship, why not just dash it and like go into a healthy relationship? But that can also make a healthy relationship, right? Learning about each other through a therapy session. Otherwise, you could just sit there and scream at each other, but in a therapy session, they're making you listen to each other.
It is actually that. And I think, like, we did couples therapy and therapy ourselves alongside each other. And I do think it's an investment, because there will be something that you're like, okay, this person, like, I'm invested in, but our communication styles were so different.
Hmm.
That came down to our upbringing, our backgrounds, like the way we saw things, like completely different. Like, we could have the best time, like the most amazing time together, but it would be like one small thing that came down to how we communicated that would just throw everything off. That took a long time for us to understand, because we were just like, you're just not my person. Like, if you don't see this, then you definitely don't understand me, and vice versa. And then we were just butting heads all the time. But then we were like, then there's this other side, which is great. So, like, what is the missing link here? And then I think us doing therapy and just kind of like talking through that, then we kind of realized, actually, maybe we just need to understand, like, I need to understand your level of communication and you understand mine. And me telling you and you telling me is not working. So actually, we need to have a therapy session to understand that. And we went to different therapists, because I think there's different styles and different modalities that
Yeah.
worked for us and didn't work for us. So it was like kind of just trying to find that sweet spot. It actually just came down to, like, don't communicate on the same level, and that's okay. But when you communicate to me here, I need to understand that what is the best response to give you, and you need to give, like, I need to understand that. That is an absolute change in our relationship, but one that we were fully invested in and we're committed to making.
Yeah.
So there will always be those levels of changes, but it's how committed are you to kind of work through that change.
Yeah.
Um, I would always say, like, any change that comes up, it shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to lose self as part of that process. Um, so again, you have to have that kind of honest conversation. Like, is what you're asking of me too much? Am I going to lose who I am or that authenticity that makes me me? Or actually, this is probably something good. Like, I need to understand this. Like, this is going to kind of add to my growth as a human being, to
Yeah.
understand this. And I think once we got there, then yeah, like it was literally like, I don't know, mic drop moment. Like, it was it ever, did it have to be this complicated? No, it didn't. It was very easy. um, it's almost like an overnight process. Like, I just needed to understand that about you, and you just needed to understand that about me. And then I think once we got there, then it was like amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so powerful to hear it too, because I mean, I talk about this a lot that we're in such a throwaway culture now where people just don't want to work on anything because you can get somebody else with the swipe of a button, right? So yeah, that's powerful to hear, and I feel like that will give a lot of us some hope for the future. Um, do you feel like also like in relationships, so how long were you single before you went into your next relationship?
Honestly, around like 7 years, maybe seven,
Okay,
like on and off relationships.
but nothing solid.
Yeah, nothing solid. Yeah, I'd probably say like 7 years.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can hop from one relationship to another without having to go through a period of being alone?
Truth be told, I think I'm very open to meeting new people. The term hop to relationship, it depends what we classify as that. Like, I am I am very open to, like, we can chill, we can go for like dinner, we can do all of that, but fully fledged, like I am in it with you, no. And I'm not even talking about physical here. Like, I could break up with someone, let's say, she says this now and she's been out of the game for a long time, but let's just say I could probably easy, like, I don't know, like a month after breaking up with someone, go and meet someone very, very easily. Just in a, I'm gonna meet you. Because
Yeah.
I'm quite intrigued by like human beings and being in conversation. And generally I like to. But for there to be like an emotional connection and like I'm now ready for a relationship, I would say no.
Do you think that differs between men and women?
No, there's like this theory that there is, but I actually don't know if there is, to be honest.
Yeah.
What I will say, without being very controversial, uh, maybe with men, there's this tendency to like grasp onto the physical, more so than the women. The emotionals are very hard, is very difficult. So, like, if you want that companionship, I also think just ask yourself what you want right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Do I want an emotional relationship? Like, if I've been in a relationship for 5 years, am I really going to be able to find an emotional relationship? I don't know, in a month? Probably not.
Yeah.
You can find a physical relationship, but if that's what you want, more do you. Go do your thing and be happy and live life to the fullest. Like, yeah, I'm down, do it. But then also ask yourself, like, am I going to do that? Get into something physical with someone and then feel like shit at the day after? I would probably say if the answer is yes, maybe not the best thing to do. But if it's going to like support you in your process, hey,
Yeah, do it.
go do your thing. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone I guess deals with things differently, but yeah, it's an interesting take that men would probably hold on to the physical part a little bit more than the emotional part.
Yeah. And also, why that's just through experience and talking to like male friends. Like, I know that like it's the thing that like, yeah, men just want to go and sleep with anyone after they've broken up. Like, I can't personally speak to that. If I think about the males that I have in my life and when they've broken up with people and what they go and do, yeah, they tend to go and do that. So if I'm going to speak to that, then yes, that's what will happen. But you know, it's whatever makes you happy. That's what I say.
Yeah, there's that theory that, women end their relationships when they're already in the relationship. So if you're in like a
Yes.
5-year relationship, it's like the last 6 months you've already been debating it and kind of stepping out. And then the men go do their thing, like you just said, for a couple months after, and then they actually realize what happened months later. And I think that makes it even harder for females then to then 5 months later get a message, be like, oh, let's try to rekindle when you've been trying to get over that for the past year, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like, yeah, emotionally we're in different places to some degree.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I feel like if you're gonna get that message and fight, like, but also for the women on the other side, I think sometimes that journey, like, if I speak to friends now that are like dating, and then they're talking to a guy, like they've been speaking to them for a couple of months, like maybe they've like emotionally they feel like they're on a level with them, and then there's physical that's happened, and then they just disappear.
Yeah.
Like it's probably because they haven't been 100% transparent with you from the beginning. Like where are
Yeah.
they at? They just broke up with someone. They've now found someone. Yeah. But listen, honestly, it's not any different. Men, women, 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 men. It's all the same. Like
Yeah.
it's honestly, it's all the same. So I
Yeah.
just feel like, yeah, it's just part.
Basically, dating in 2025 is an absolute shit show. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, kind of been saying that for the last couple of years now. But yeah, 2025, we can say. I don't know if it's going to get different in 2026 or 27, but yeah.
Amazing. All right. We're gonna end this with two would you rather questions.
Oh, yeah.
So here's your first one. Would you rather date someone who's amazing in bed but terrible at communication, or someone who's boring in bed but emotionally intelligent?
Definitely for the emotional intelligence. I can sort myself out very well. Like, I don't, if I had to pick, yeah, the emotional intelligence. If I can't have a conversation with you and meet you on a level, like, yes, I
I feel
can.
like that's what I mean, this would you rather is terrible because both suck, but I feel like that's literally what dating is now. It's like you gotta pick and choose, take your wins.
Listen, if someone's open, you can teach them. I can't teach emotional intelligence. Like,
True.
it's impossible.
That
We
is
can,
very true.
we can teach all the rest. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Would you rather date someone who has never had a relationship or someone who has had too many?
Mm, I don't know what too many is, but I'd probably go with the too many.
Yeah.
It, coupled with that emotional relationship, like emotional intelligence, like you might have had 50 relationships. There's a lot to be said. But
Yeah.
judgment, like I can date you, but I can also walk away from you. But I definitely think, yeah, if you've had none, it's going to be very challenging.
Yeah, you're gonna be teaching them everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Agreed. Fully aligned. All right. This was our podcast for today. Thank you so much for being there.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
And you, that was so much fun. Thank you so much. Take care.